Hi, this is Jill Bates. Thank you for joining me for today's Wednesday webinar. I work at ESU 8 as the Assistant Administrator and also as the Nursing Coordinator, where I'm privileged to work with a staff of wonderful registered school nurses. The webinar today will address these two questions. What does a school nurse do? And when should I contact her or send a student to see her? If you're like most people, when you think of a school nurse, the things that come to mind are Band-Aids, handing out ice packs, perhaps screening vision and hearing, and teaching the annual 5th grade puberty classes. But I can tell you from experience and over a long career as a school nurse that school nursing has changed. School nurses now work under a variety of school health laws, including medication administration, immunization requirements, physical and visual examination requirements, regulations for screening and for communicable disease control, self-management regulations for asthma, anaphylaxis, and diabetes, as well as an emergency protocol and protocols for return to learn, for concussions and pediatric cancer, and this year, suicide prevention. So when do you call a school nurse? Let's say I have a new 5th grade student who moved here this year from Massachusetts. Well, perhaps your school nurse has been hounding you about some paperwork that's required. This is because physical and visual examinations are required for all students entering our school, either as kindergartners, as 7th graders, or as out-of-state transfer students. I think we're all used to kindergartners needing to have physicals and vision evaluations, but did you know out-of-state transfer students have to have those too? Parents do have the right to refuse these physicals and visual evaluations, and there is a refusal form that they can sign. So when your school nurse asks you to help her by gathering this paperwork, please know that she's just following the laws regarding physical and visual exams. Next question. The nurse asks me to send home a letter to the parents about immunizations. Okay. Immunizations are also required for kindergartners, for 7th graders, for out-of-state transfer students, and for preschoolers. Every year, the Department of Health and Human Services publishes a new summary of school immunization rules and regulations. This is the information that your school nurse and often your office help is trying to gather from parents. In fact, the law says students cannot come to school without the immunizations. Every year, your school nurse must submit an annual immunization report to the Department of Health and Human Services. This report is due in mid-November, which is why there is such a bustle of activity this time of year trying to get that information and obtain those parental signatures. Parents cannot just refuse to have immunizations. There are only two kinds of waivers that are allowed. One is a medical waiver that is signed by either a physician, a PA, or a nurse practitioner, stating that the vaccine would be harmful or injurious to the child or to someone in his or her immediate family. The other waiver is a waiver, a religious waiver, and it must be notarized. So a parent can't just say, I've decided I don't want to immunize my kids. There has to be an official and legal waiver on file. Now, this is something that might happen in your classroom. A student handed me an envelope this morning when he or she came to school, and inside it had some pills and a note from his mom. And the note said, please give this to my son today after lunch. Do you give the pills? Well, I sure hope not. We also have rules regarding medications. Nebraska has what is known as the Medication Aid Act. And this act requires that anybody at school who administers medication must be trained to do so by a licensed healthcare professional, which in most cases is your school nurse. There are specific competencies that this staff member must possess. There are specific guidelines for giving the medication, and there is specific documentation that must be done. So if a student comes in with a pill and it's in a baggie or an envelope and says, I'm supposed to take this at noon and you're supposed to give it to me, please contact your school nurse, or at least contact your secretary in your school office and find out who gives the medication in your schools. There's specific paperwork that has to be filled out before any kind of medication can be given. One other thing to note is that all medications must be sent to school in their original container. They can't be put in a plastic bag or an empty pill bottle or some kind of over-the-counter pill bottle where you've just dumped the baby aspirin out and put in the amoxicillin or something. It has to be in the original medication container. So that's another time to contact your school nurse. Okay. A student in my classroom keeps scratching his head. Communicable diseases are just something that's going to happen at school. It's going to happen at school. They happen in our community. They happen in our homes. Again, the Department of Health and Human Services has guidelines for schools for the control of communicable disease. We have specific exclusion guidelines, and you can find this information if you just do a Google search for Chapter 3, School Health Communicable Disease Control, Nebraska. It'll bring up this chart. This is a chart that your school nurse uses frequently because it gives us specific guidelines on what we can do when a child comes into our office and appears that he or she may have a communicable disease. It gives a list of the diseases and the conditions, the incubation period, symptoms that you can look for. It gives the period that the child will, or the adult, will be infectious, and then the minimum isolation periods and control measures. So let's go back to that scratchy head. We think perhaps if a child is scratching his or her head a lot, that maybe we want to have the school nurse check for head lice. School nurse checks for head lice. She finds live lice on the child's head. If we look at this chart from our Department of Health and Human Services, it tells us that parents of students with live lice are to be notified and the child treated prior to return to school. So this is a child that needs to go home. If the nurse looks, checks the hair very, very carefully, sees no live lice, but sees some nits, you can see that our guidelines from our State Department say nits are not a cause for school exclusion. So school nurses use this information to help us when we make decisions about when a child needs to be excluded and when a child can return. If you see a child that appears to have any kind of communicable disease, a rash, looks flushed, says they're sick to their stomach, they're vomiting, they said they had diarrhea, please send them to your school nurse and let the school nurse assess that situation. Okay, here's another one. One student always squints when he looks at the board. And another one never seems to follow directions. I can give those directions and so-and-so has no idea what's going on. Well, perhaps they need to be screened. Yes, school nurses still screen for vision and hearing, just like we've always done, but we also screen for oral health. So there's a dental assessment. We do a height and weight assessment as well as a calculation of BMI. And just last year, we began screening for near vision in first grade and third grade. Now you can look at this chart. This is our minimum required annual school health screenings. Traditionally, especially in schools within ESU 8, we screen for the most part every student every year if time allows. However, if there is not enough time to get all of that screening done, these are the minimum requirements. Preschoolers are screened every year, as are students in kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade, seventh grade, and 10th grade. Screeners have to be trained by a licensed healthcare professional. So if there are community members that want to volunteer to screen, there is a small training process that must be completed and some competencies must be documented. Screening can be waived only with a written statement by a doctor, a PA, or a nurse practitioner if there was a similar screening within 6 months. So this is another case where parents just can't opt out. There has to be a signed waiver. Now, you can ask to have the nurse screen your student anytime. She always has her screening equipment either with her or available at her next visit. So if you see a child who seems to be struggling when they read, or they appear that they can't hear, or they're easily distracted, or they complain of headaches a lot, please just ask the nurse to screen the next time that she's in. Put a note in her mailbox or a note on her desk and say, I'd like you to screen this student the next time you're in our school, okay? They can screen any time of year. A student in my class carries an inhaler. Most likely that child has diagnosed asthma. We're seeing a lot more students in our schools with asthma, with severe allergies or anaphylaxis, and with diabetes. School nurses will be diligently working this time of year to obtain action plans for these students, so we know specifically what to do for day-to-day care for these children, and also what to do in case of an emergency. So the nurse may be asking you to send home an attack on asthma, student asthma and anaphylaxis action plan. Please do that. She might ask you to post a sign that says this is a net-free zone, or this is a safe area, or if you have a diabetic, there may be some training that's going to be required. You might be asked to help monitor some blood sugar levels or be trained in what to do in a diabetic emergency. We do this because of the safety of the children. We want to make sure that school is a real safe environment for them and for everyone. So if you are aware of students that have any of these medical conditions and you have not received any kind of paperwork, please contact your school nurse and work together with her to make sure that you get your action plan in place so that everyone knows what their role is to keep the students safe. I have a student who has to check her blood sugar several times a day. Now this would be in the case of a diabetic. In Nebraska, our legislature passed a couple of laws a few years ago that said that students can self-manage asthma, severe allergies or anaphylaxis, and diabetes if they have written documentation from their parents and their physicians. This would include things like totally managing their blood sugar checks, administration of insulin, carrying an EpiPen and handling all of their asthma medications, including inhalers and nebulizers and that type of thing. In most of our schools, only maybe a few high school students totally self-manage these medical conditions. Many of the schools believe that it's probably in the best interest of the child's safety and health to have someone at school who is responsible for checking. But as the child grows and gets closer to those upper high school years, their parents and their physician may believe that it's time for the child to self-manage. So you may see some self-management documentation forms returning to school also. I saw a bag in the office labeled Emergency Response Kit. What's that all about? Well, several years ago, we had a new rule passed, Rule 59, which outlines an emergency protocol. It also requires that each school has an emergency response team that is made up of members who are trained in CPR and also trained to administer EpiPens and nebulized albuterol. In most schools, this team consists of maybe 4 to 6 people. Oftentimes, a principal or a counselor might be on the team, the school nurse might be on the team, but we also try to have some people on the team who are trained, who are there every day. Because, as we all know, things happen when the nurse is out of the building, the principal's out of the building, the superintendent's out of the building. So we want to make sure that we have a wide representation on that team so that we can cover any kind of an emergency situation. This team will use that emergency response kit as well as the action plans for students who have asthma or anaphylaxis, and make decisions based upon that training and that information. When this was passed, I really didn't think that we were going to be using this protocol. And over the years, I've been surprised at how often it has been used in our schools, many times on teachers and staff members. I'll give you an example where a staff member had an undiagnosed, an unknown allergy to a food product, had an anaphylactic allergic reaction, and the secretary administered the EpiPen and the albuterol, and they called 911 and probably saved the teacher's life. So I think you can feel very confident that your team will know what to do in emergency cases, and you can be very thankful that the state of Nebraska has required that all schools have EpiPens and nebulized albuterol on hand to use in these emergency situations. Okay, here's another situation. A boy in my class fell off his bike, and he was hospitalized overnight with a concussion. Well, this is definitely a time that you would want to contact your school nurse. Let her know, because in the state of Nebraska, we also have 2 return to learn protocols. The first return to learn protocol is for those students that have had a traumatic brain injury, including a concussion. And this isn't just for athletes who are worried about returning to play, but this one addresses return to the classroom and getting them back up academically where they can handle the academic caseload in the class. So if there is a student that has a concussion, please contact your school nurse or your principal. Each school should also have a concussion management team that will know that they can contact the BURST team. The BURST team is a brain injury response team that offers support to schools. I'm a member of the BURST team in this area, as is Sonia Simons, one of our school psychologists. And we can offer support for teachers and other people in the school as they're looking at getting that child back to the class. This can be a first grader who had a bike accident, a football player who had a concussion while he was playing the sport. So any kind of a head injury should be reported to your school nurse so they can get in contact with the BURST team. Just this last spring, the legislature passed another return to learn protocol. This one is for pediatric cancer. And it kind of goes without saying that if a student is diagnosed with cancer, that the school nurse needs to be involved in that situation too, to help develop a return to the classroom protocol. Here is another situation. A girl on my volleyball team just seems so sad all the time. Also this year, and just became effective in August, is the suicide prevention training. And this training is required in Nebraska for all school personnel who have contact with students. In fact, you've probably taken this online suicide prevention training. Even though you're trained, if you see students that are exhibiting signs that have you a little worried about their emotional well-being or their psychological state, please contact your school counselor or your school psychologist or your school nurse. Because the more people who are aware of students that have problems, the better we can serve that student and make sure that they are in a safe environment and getting the care that they need. So again, when should you contact the school nurse? Well, if a student appears ill or has an injury, you would. Injuries on the playground, a student whose face is flushed, yes, you contact the school nurse right away. Remember, if the student appears to have difficulty seeing the board or hearing in the classroom, let the school nurse know so that she can screen them right away. We don't want a student to sit in the classroom and miss being able to see the board or to read the book in front of them or to hear what's going on for a few weeks or a couple of months when they could have been screened earlier and we could have gotten them some treatment. Contact your school nurse if a student has a rash or scratching their head a lot. You'll also want to contact the nurse if a student brings medication to the school so that we can get the paperwork going there. If the student has a food allergy, if the parent tells you, oh yeah, my child can't have any peanut butter because they're allergic to peanuts, let your school nurse know. If the student has a head injury, you'll want to let the nurse know so they can contact the burst team. Student misses a lot of school. And sometimes this may be over a long period of time. Let your school nurse know, especially if she's an itinerant nurse who isn't there every day. Let her know who's having problems with regular attendance. That's important for her to follow up on that. If the student has been hospitalized, had a fracture, or any other kind of severe injury or serious illness, again, if your nurse is itinerant and it only comes once a week or once every other week, please let her know so that she can follow up and contact the parents to see if there's anything else that the school needs to know. And finally, contact the school nurse if a student has been diagnosed with cancer. As always, ESU 8 school nurses believe that healthy children learn better. We're here to serve your students. We're here to serve you, and we're here to work with schools and families. So please contact us if you'd like to learn more about school nursing or if you have any questions. And thanks for joining me. Have a great day.